When you play the Game of Thrones,
Subscribe and like.
you die. There is no middle ground.
All right, hello YouTube. Welcome back to the Grease Goblin YouTube channel. Today's video, we're going to be doing once again our reread, doing Tyrion 2: A Clash of Kings. This is one of my favorite chapters, going back and rereading through, Tyrion's whole plot line in this book, as it basically covers kind of just a bunch of conversations, and some of the best stuff with Tyrion is his conversations. Specifically, we're going to get Janos Slint in this one, and then another conversation with kind of Varys and Bronn to close it out. But it's a great chapter. I think for you guys that have either read this in the books or watched in the show, fantastic, event where we see Janos Slint kind of getting his comeuppance, more or less. So we're going to go through that today in today's video. If you did want to listen to these, on the road or, just not at home, highly recommend, going to the Spotify for the channel. Makes it easier to just listen to instead of having to have the whole video open on YouTube. But yeah, let's get into Tyrion 2: A Clash of Kings. So page 93 starts with Tyrion and Janos Slint having more or less a dinner. It's in the small hall. It's kind of dimly lit, and really is to show how intimate this kind of is, right? It's only Janos and Tyrion in this close proximity. It's really about Tyrion trying to figure out who Janos Slint is and what he has been involved with in book 1. So for things like Ned's execution, or whether it's what's been happening with Robert's bastards and how Cersei's been kind of behind that as well. Tyrion describes Janos as being kind of like a frog-faced, built like a keg man. I do think the actor who portrayed Janos in the show did a really good job and actually really presents what I feel like Janos Slint almost would look like, if not a bit even more big and pudgy in the face. But yeah. And George does a really good job of kind of describing the way Janos eats as a reflection onto who he is as a person. He is someone that's very kind of greedy and crude, and that comes on how he eats, right? He's drinking heavily with this wine, so he's kind of proposing about how greedy he is as a person. And also you think about how he's eating this food. It seems very sloppy and crude. You think about the actions Janos Slint has done, being the person in charge of the Gold Cloaks under his tutelage. There has been a bunch of unrest in the city and crime, and even him ordered a baby to be killed. Now, yes, he did get those commands from higher ups, but still he had it done, which is kind of insane. It just kind of shows who he is as a person. Tyrion notes how he is clothed in a black satin doublet and a cloth of gold half cape. He definitely gives the appearance of trying to become, or wanting to be, a noble, right? He is somebody that was a butcher's son, and now he's, the Lord of Harrenhal. He's trying to play up to that, right? He's trying to show that he is somebody that has power and wealth and trying to fit into kind of the higher class. But Tyrion is kind of setting Janos up. He is having Janos be basically drinking a bunch of wine while Tyrion himself is drinking quite little. He's doing the opposite of what Cersei does, right? He's getting Janos in a vulnerable place, right? There's not a lot of people here in this hall. He's being very friendly and joking with Janos Slint, but at the same time, he's winding him up. He wants Janos to give him information before he sends him to the wall. And Tyrion even kind of plays with this with Janos Slint, because when Janos calls him Lord Tyrion kind of discounts this. Tyrion has all the power. He doesn't need to be named a lord like Janos Slint wants to be, because that's where all of his power comes from. And so you see that dynamic written right away. It's something I think George does really well in this first page of kind of introducing us into the chapter. Is you take a look at Tyrion and Janos, and they are completely different. Tyrion, all of his power comes from being named Hand of the King by Tywin, but also all these soldiers and all these people he's convincing to his side. Janos Slint, all he has is being named Lord of Harrenhal, and that's basically hindering that Cersei or Tyrion just doesn't take that away at any point. It's Slint trying to play the role that he shouldn't be really playing at all. It's not to his station. If you think about how things are done in Westeros, this was a really, really huge thing that Cersei gave him so that he could turn on Ned. And to be honest, it's a pretty fair deal, right? And you have to understand why Cersei did it, but the issue that Slint has is that even though that he did get on Cersei's good side and he did side with her in the end with Littlefinger, he at the same time could very easily be unmade. But that kind of gets us into page 94. The real big part of page 93 is really just kind of showing us the differences between someone like Tyrion and Janos. But Tyrion even thinks about one of the first things that he did after being Hand of the King is finding the finest cook in the city, which makes a lot of sense when you think about the idea that the food is eventually going to start getting shorted. You want to get the best meals as you possibly can. Also, I can really appreciate Tyrion for wanting his food first. I'm a big enjoyer of food, and as I would assume many of you guys are, you want to have that good quality, right? It's Tyrion kind of flexing his power and his prowess. It's the same thing that Tywin does, because Tyrion is playing that role. Right now, he is the person in charge of King's Landing, even though Joffrey is the person named the king, and Cersei is the queen regent. She before had all the power here. Tyrion is kind of usurping that. He's flexing his wealth and his power over someone like Janos Slint. And we even see like there's different features, a variety of rich dishes. Every single course, there's a different type of wine, really buttering up Janos Slint and making him feel, safe, right? To say some of these things that maybe he doesn't want to say if he was, not being coerced. Slynt even kind of jokes about having to hire this cook when he goes back to Harrenhal, and Tyrion, he's using his humor and his flattery, putting Slynt at ease, saying wars have been started for less, just nice little jokes. Tyrion is not going to put on the gas until he's ready, until he's got enough information that he wants to lean into it. But the conversation shifts to Janos Slint as, Tyrion is kind of once again flattering him, saying someone must be very bold to take Harrenhal given all the bad that's come of it, right? All these different families that have taken Harrenhal after Harren's demise, all of them have died out. It seems cursed and all that stuff, which we'll end up seeing with Arya in this book. But Slynt, boasts. You have to be fearless and have a lot of ambition to do so. And it's interesting, right? Because you look at Janos, yes, he has a lot of ambition, but he has quite a lot of fear, as we'll see, as we'll see kind of in the 5th book when he finally does get killed. It's all things that Tyrion's kind of building Janos up to tear him down. Tyrion then shifts the conversation, moving to the idea of who should be the new commander for the City Watch. Janos is not going to be able to do that, given he's going to be going to Harrenhal soon. And so who is going to take over, right? That's the big key point. And Janos has a list of 6 individuals, but Slynt recommends one person in particular, an Alar Deem, somebody that is basically like his right-hand man, somebody that will do all of his orders without questioning it. And Janos even talks about, you have to know your men, which is something that's very interesting, is like Ned says that same thing. And all these different people say this different things along the same lines. But the thing that's interesting about Janos is he's thinking about more of their negative qualities than he's even thinking about their positive qualities. The fact that you have somebody that you can just blindly order to kill a baby is kind of insane. But Tyrion kind of pushes back on this. He brings up Sir Jacqueline Bywater, somebody that Varys has brought up to him, but something Tyrion's not going to say to Janos, but wants to see what Janos's opinion kind of are on Jacqueline Bywater. And Slynt is not thrilled with him, right? Slynt is somebody with very low honor and duty and all those things. He doesn't like Bywater. As Slynt says that he is somebody that is rigid and unpopular, even mocking his injury as he doesn't have one of his hands. Which is interesting given how we're going to see that with Jaime in the next book, just kind of slightly foreshadowing how Jaime is going to be treated by others as well. And Slynt continues saying he prefers Deem because he is a feared person. Janos is somebody that believes in ruling by fear and not love and popularity, which is interesting, right? You see how Janos Slint is very similar to someone like Cersei, and why Cersei might even like somebody like Slynt because of his ruthlessness, willing to do whatever, his higher-ups are telling him. But also it shows something else, right? He is easily swayed. His greed takes over. One of the reasons why Littlefinger is kind of his higher-up, right? In the terms of Ned's killing you, if you think about that, right? All it would need to be a little bit of gold goes to Slynt, and maybe something goes wrong and Ned's head is taken off. That's something that Tyrion's really going to kind of try to lean into with Janos Slint, but that'll get us into page 95. As Tyrion brings up something else that kind of goes against Deem, as it was said that there was some sort of controversy with Deem in a brothel, because, again, you're in a really weird spot right now if you're a city, right? You're eventually going to be getting completely blockaded for any supplies, especially from Renly in the south, and then Stannis, not letting any ships come to King's Landing. So you have this weird situation where you would rather your people, actually like you as an organization. When they hear something like, oh yeah, the City Watch or the Gold Cloaks killed a baby and their mother brutally, and there's no real reason given, the people are going to turn against you. That's what happens to Joffrey. All these people are going to turn against him as this book goes on because he's just not a good king. But again, Slynt defends him, right? Slynt defends Alardim, saying, even though it was a brutal action, he blames the victim. He blames the mother for not getting out of the way. Could you imagine that? You're a mother and some guy tells you, yeah, I'm going to kill your child, get out of the way. I think most mothers would react in the same way. And Janos just keeps it up to, oh, well, should have gotten out of the way. What? Tells you exactly what kind of person Janos Slint is. But it also shows that Deem is willing to perform any difficult task without question. That is something that is unheard of, right? And, we can compare this to things in our own world, right? If you think about, I won't say certain terminology because I don't want this video to just get canceled by YouTube, but think about World War II. You think about a certain nation that was committing a lot of war crimes. And again, there were war crimes on every side, of course, but one side more than others. You think about the men there, the soldiers, and, what did they question these things that they were being told to do? That's kind of something I think that's very interesting here with Alardim. And Tyrion says exactly what we're all thinking. It's just natural that a mother would try to protect her child. That should have been something that everybody should have known there right off the get-go. It just shows a lack of intelligence and or wisdom, and a lack of caring for the innocents. But Tyrion is also trying to distract Janos Slint. Now that we're getting to some of these difficult issues and the difficult conversations going to begin, he needs to butter up Janos again, so he distracts him with this wine and delicate or sharp cheese. Slint continues to praise Deem as a hard man for a hard job, revealing his own acceptance of ruthlessness and disregard for the lives of lower-class people, which is insane. Given that Janos Slint himself came from the lower class, you'd think he'd be a little bit more understanding of some of the things going on in the city, and he just isn't. He's just somebody that is a cruel, just idiot. And he even specifically brings up this terminology that strikes Tyrion, and really is where Tyrion starts to turn on Janos Slint. He says specifically that the woman was some whore and her whelp. Think about that terminology when we get into the next book, right? When, you have Tywin and Tyrion and that ending there. This is going to make Tyrion instantly think about his first wife, Tysha, who he believes was a whore paid, right, to marry him and all those things. And then also Shay, who is also here. That's something that's instantly going to strike a nerve with Tyrion, because his biggest flaw is his wanting for actual love and to be accepted. And he hasn't been able to find that outside of Tysha, but in his mind, he doesn't think that actually was love. Tyrion then tries to probe a little further by casually asking who gave the order to target the woman and her child. But Slynt is still a little too wary. He's not fully drunk, right? He knows he shouldn't reveal things like that. And he avoids kind of answering the question directly. Again, he boasts about his loyalty and discretion. He's basically just saying, I got an order, I followed it through, I didn't ask questions. That's basically his answer to Tyrion. And honestly, if you're Janos Slint, you have to think that that's actually a good thing, right? You might gotta be thinking, oh yeah, Tyrion, I'm very loyal. I will do what you tell me. I won't, no questions, right? Or the people below me that I like Alardim that I'm telling you should be the person in charge, they won't question you at all. You can tell them to do whatever and they'll do whatever. He doesn't understand where Tyrion is kind of poking at, right? But Tyrion shifts the conversation once again, right? Because there's this mention of the cheese and it becoming scarce due to the war. He's shifting away from something that Slynt didn't want to really talk about, just to keep him a little bit off balance once again. But this is where the rug starts to be taken under Janos's feet, right? Because he draws a parallel to Lord Jeor Mormont, right? Because he is someone that also is looking for kind of a successor, right? He's seeing the Night's Watch and it's failing because of the men there that aren't really that great of soldiers or people committing terrible crimes, not really competent people to be on the wall. And he's drawing that idea with this idea of who to replace Janos Slint with, but he's also showing that Janos Slint is somebody that's just as bad, right? He's kind of the level of these people that Jeor Mormont is talking about at the wall. And then he kind of pokes it a little further. He suggests sarcastically at first that someone like Slynt or Deem would be ideal for the Night's Watch. And again, highlighting that these are men that are not of good quality. And also foreshadowing of where they're eventually going to go. And Slynt kind of gives me, the way I read this all the time is I think Slynt gives me kind of this chuckling, like nervous vibe, right? Like this is a weird idea for Tyrion to just randomly bring up. And he laughs it off, and, missing Tyrion's obvious mockery and things like that. But that's going to get us into page 96, where it really starts to heat up from here. Because in page 96, Tyrion starts to reference the execution of Ned Stark. Because this is something that Tyrion is trying to get to the bottom of. He's trying to figure out what people are working in their own interests and are not loyal to the Lannisters. And Slynt could be one of those people. As Janos in the last page kind of joked off this idea of going to the wall and that, oh, that would never happen, Tyrion kind of brings it back to Ned. Ned's never expected to be killed, and that wasn't even the plan either, right? The plan was for Ned to go to the wall. Something happened there. Joffrey decides to take Ned's head. Joffrey is a young 13-year-old. How did he get this idea into his head? Was it because of just the bloodlust of the crowd? Or was it because somebody, whispered in his ear and others took the action almost because they knew it was going to happen? That's kind of what Tyrion starts to hint at. Because Slynt is going to be taken off guard. When Tyrion starts saying, oh yeah, the queen wanted, this to be done and it wasn't, why was that? Janos, you're saying you're so loyal to the crown, but yet Cersei, the person that should be in charge, is completely disregarded. Why did that occur? And Slynt, I think, justifiably, but I think Slynt has the perfect kind of counter to that, right? Slynt says, well, that's what the king ordered. He ordered it in front of the entire, city. That's what he said. He wanted Ned to die. And so I just did my job. But Tyrion continues probing, asking to see Slynt's clasp, which is in the shape of a spear. And he uses it to basically question Slynt directly. He's done with kind of dancing around the subject. Tyrion's going to go for the kill now. And this is where I want to read, because I think this is one of my favorite parts of the early story of A Clash of Kings. And so I thought, let's do a little read from the book. Again, I haven't done this in the past couple episodes because I haven't thought there have been like really big moments that I wanted to read directly from George's own words. But I think this would be a good time. So let's read about how Tyrion springs the trap on Janos Slint. Hesitantly, Lord Janos drew out the ornament and handed it to Tyrion. We have goldsmiths in Lannisport who do better work. The red enamel blood is a shade much, if you don't mind my saying. Tell me, my lord, did you drive the spear into the man's back yourself, or did you only give the command? I gave the command, and I'd give it again. Lord Stark was a traitor. The bald spot in the middle of Slynt's head was beet red, and his cloth of gold cape had slithered off his shoulders onto the floor. The man tried to buy me, little dreaming that you'd already been sold. Slynt slammed down his wine cup. Are you drunk? If you think I will sit here and have my honor questioned, what honor is that? I do admit you made a better bargain than Sir Jacqueline, a lordship and a castle for a spear thrust in the back, and you didn't even need to thrust the spear. He tossed the golden ornament back to Janos Slint. It bounced off his chest and clattered to the floor as the man rose. I mislike the tone of your voice, my lord, cutting off as he says, imp. I am the Lord of Harrenhal and a member of the King's Council. Who are you to chastise me like this? Tyrion cocked his head sideways. I think you know quite well who I am. How many sons do you have? What are my sons to you, dwarf? Dwarf, his anger flashed. You should have stopped at imp. I am Tyrion of House Lannister, and someday, if you have the sense the gods gave a sea slug, you will drop to your knees in thanks that it was me you had to deal with, and not my lord father. Now, how many sons do you have? That's where I want to cut it off in terms of the reading, but Tyrion goes from 0 to 100 quite quickly. He was buttering him up, trying to see how much information he could get from Janos willingly, but when Janos started to become defensive, Tyrion puts him in his place, calling him out for his lack of honor and how he betrayed Ned at the flip of a hat, taking a bribe to go with Cersei and Littlefinger. And even pointing out that he is part of one of the great houses and he is just basically a butcher's son. And so you come to this idea where it's interesting because if you think about what Janos Slint did, if it wasn't for Janos Slint, Ned Stark would be sitting on the throne right now and all of that stuff. So it's interesting because you can see why Tyrion doesn't like Janos. He's a slithery snake who's very full of greed and is not someone you can trust. But at the same time, he did do your family quite a big, deed, right? Saving Cersei and Joffrey from being arrested by Ned and the rest of the council. So it's interesting, right? Because Tyrion is, in a way, kind of going against his family in a way, but at the same time, he's not, right? Because Janos Slint is under Littlefinger's thumb. So Littlefinger is the real person that Janos is going to report to and, actually be the person he looks to, not Cersei. So that's interesting given the background knowledge we have, but it is interesting, Tyrion's decision to move on from Janos, which I think is a good decision for him because he can't trust Janos. But it is interesting, right? Because all the things that Tyrion is kind of getting on him about are things that actually helped House Lannister outside of, of course, Ned's execution. And getting into page 97, Tyrion at least gives something to Slynt, right? Slynt is desperate now. He's seen the error of his ways. Tyrion tells, Slynt that his family will be taken, after in terms of that the young boys will be fostered and potentially knighted at some point, while the elder will inherit the family title. Though not Harrenhal, he will also be in charge of getting the daughter married off to someone. So Slynt is still, his family is still gaining something out of this, right? They did go up quite a bit in terms of, possibly having knights, possibly a lordship somewhere. But you lose Harrenhal. And honestly, this is probably a better deal. It's the what really Janos should have gotten in the first place. He then further on dismisses the value of Slynt's newly acquired sigil by kicking the golden spear across the floor, showing his disdain for Slynt's elevation and lack of true nobility. And that's something that's quite interesting, right? Is how do people go from one class to the next? And it's very difficult, right? We see someone like Davos in this book, somebody like Janos in the last book. There's a lot of different people that we do see that are from lower classes make it to higher classes, but those are very much rarities. Those do not occur very often. And when they do, you are looked down to by the bigger houses. And that's one of the main issues that George R. R. Martin writes about in this story, is about the classism. It is very difficult to move from one class to the next. At this, Slynt stammers in fear, assuming that he may be killed, but Tyrion reveals his fate. It's a bit softer, he's not going to be killed, but it's still a life of exile, to the wall, aboard a ship departing in the morning to join the Night's Watch, where he will deliver Tyrion's regards to Lord Commander Mormont. He is, giving Lord Commander Mormont more men. There might not be good men, and they will have kind of some deep repercussions later on, but still, he is giving Mormont men. But upon realizing that he won't be executed, Slynt regains some of his composure. Right now that he knows, okay, Tyrion's not going to try to kill me, he's just trying to send me into exile, I have a little bit more confidence. Maybe I can pull on some of my friends. Janos Slynt's favorite line, I have friends at court. He says that he will use his friends, or his friends will back him up, like Joffrey, Littlefinger, and the Queen. And it's interesting that he notes them in this sort of order, right? Littlefinger has more importance, is someone that first comes to mind more than someone like Cersei. Should tell you where his loyalties kind of lie. But despite this, Slynt instantly tries to basically run away. He tries to run away from this confrontation. He's the first one to back down. As he goes to leave the room in a fluster, angrily clattering up the stairs, he only stops to encounter Sir Jacqueline Bywater, the new captain of the City Watch, waiting for him at the door. The presence of Bywater, with his iron hand strapped to the stump of his wrist, signified the end for Janos Slint. At least in the King's Landing plot. He'll have some more later on, but that is not here or now. But that gets us into page 98. Sir Jacqueline Bywater arrives with a group of gold cloaks to escort Janos Slint to the docks. Confirming his replacement as commander of the City Watch, Slynt realizes he has lost control as the soldiers who had once served him escort him out. And you got to be thinking, for Janos, you're on top of the world, right? You had a lot of influence, but Janos was a pawn. He was somebody to be used by others like Littlefinger, Cersei, and even Tyrion. Unfortunately, the Game of Thrones did not go well for him. Tyrion hands Bywater a list of 6 men to accompany Slynt on the ship to the wall, all the men that Slynt had suggested to be taking his place. And you can understand why. That means they're all going to be brutal, corrupt. Tyrion wants his own man to be at the top of the gold cloaks, because that means that he will have their loyalty as long as he pays them well, and things like Littlefinger had been doing to Janos. But it's Tyrion taking other people's power and giving it to himself. He needs the swords, he needs the backing. just like Ned did in book 1, Tyrion also needs that support. It's no different. It's a bit more maybe dire for Ned than it is for Tyrion, but the massive thing to worry about first and foremost, which Tyrion has started doing in the first 2 chapters, getting the Lannister men, the household guard there behind him, and also getting the gold cloaks to his side. He wants to have all the swords, the people that could make him his hand on his side. But there is one difference between the rest of the other 5 men. Alar Deem, as Tyrion quietly suggests that Deem might accidentally be lost at sea, a bit of a discreet way of eliminating him as a threat and an undesirable individual, and somebody that killed a baby and their mother deserves to die. I wish Tyrion honestly would have done it like on page, because the guy is just a horrible person. We will see Janos, in his death and later on, but he should have died here as well. Honestly, I wish Tyrion would have just killed them all. And Bywater understands what Tyrion's kind of intending, but he remarks on the stormy northern waters and leaves, stepping on Slynt's discarded cape as, again, a nice little symbolic gesture of the fallen lord's downfall. In the span of only about 400 pages, he has gone from the top to the bottom. But this leaves Tyrion kind of alone at this. And Tyrion, I think, would be kind of frustrated from this because, one, he's finding out that, it's probably Cersei that ordered the killing of this baby and this child and Robert's bastards. And also he figures out, and also something else he'd be frustrated about is I don't think he got all the answers from Janos that he truly wanted, right? In terms of Ned's death, Janos kind of gave like a cop-out answer, and Tyrion couldn't push him further. And so I think Tyrion's a bit frustrated by, one, the events that were taking place in book 1 to book 2 before Tyrion got here. And also, he's just kind of discouraged with all these things he's learning about. At this, Varys then enters, praising Tyrion's handling of the situation, but noting Tyrion's sour mood. And Tyrion is, again, Tyrion is feeling the way I just talked about. He's feeling frustrated with everything going on with Cersei and the gold cloaks. Varys, who had known this detail, did not share it. And this is something that's interesting because Tyrion is going to be somebody that's going to have to realize he can't truly trust anyone here at court. Yes, Varys may play his side, give him good information sometimes, do what he does in this chapter, but he didn't tell Tyrion what was going on with the gold cloaks and that Cersei was behind it. That's something that Tyrion's going to think about. And Tyrion kind of damns both Cersei and Varys. He's just kind of frustrated as that gets us into page 99. But Tyrion also feels frustration because he can't do anything about it to Cersei. He doesn't have the power over her necessarily, confront her at this moment on the things that she's done. He demands Varys, provide him with more detail in the future, right? Because Tyrion wants Varys to be on his side. Having an asset like Varys is really crucial. It's the information game. Can tell you who's trying to get you killed, who's trying to do this. And we're going to see parts of that in this chapter. I do want to point out, though, the things that we see in this chapter, I think, are a lot of the reasons somebody like Aerys II would have gone mad. But Varys kind of counters, because in the talking of Robert's bastards being killed, he actually had taken measures, right? He'd actually gotten Gendry out of the city. He had never thought that they would actually kill a bastard child by Robert. And that's something that's interesting because it kind of confirms what we already knew, right? Gendry is with the Night's Watch crew going up north because of Varys. But also something that's interesting is, why does Varys take so much interest in Robert's bastards? The same reason somebody like Littlefinger, also takes that, because it's going to be later on, if you can produce somebody like Gendry, proving the Lannisters to not be truthful, right? Because all Stannis really has is he knows, right, that they are all bastards. He can't prove it necessarily without Edric Storm. That's one of the other reasons why Stannis gets Edric, because he can kind of flaunt Edric around to show that Joffrey is not a true Baratheon. Same thing kind of applies here. And Varys even acknowledges the tragedy of the situation. The girl that we had met in book 1 with Ned, the girl that seemed to love Robert Baratheon, as she is dead and her child as well. And Tyrion doubts the capacity for love in a core based upon his own experiences, right? With Tysha and the lie that Jaime was forced to tell. And even with Shay. Shay, he realizes, doesn't love him. Shay likes to be around him because he pays her well. Very similar to, say, for instance, Bronn. And it's Tyrion, which is something that he's going to battle with really more, I would say, in the beginning of the next book, but this book as well. Understanding that Shay is not somebody that loves him. Shay is somebody that is around him because he pays her well, and he basically wants a girlfriend, so he pays for one. More or less what Tyrion is still conflicted by. But he then begins to kind of contemplate what actually had occurred with Janos and the talking that they had about, for instance, Ned's death. And he seems to indeed tie it to Joffrey being the culprit. But Varys kind of takes a reproach. He seems to allude to someone else maybe being in power. Now, Varys does confirm that Joffrey commanded Stark's execution and that, for instance, Slynt and Ill and Payne carried it out without hesitation. But again, that is weird, right? Let's just take a step back. Let's say that you were in a play, right? You're in a play and you all have all these roles and all these lines that you're supposed to do. What would you do if, for instance, out of nowhere, two people in the act that you're with change their lines completely and they do different actions? That doesn't come out of nowhere, right? And that's Varys trying to point to that. There was some premeditation. There was an idea already put into people like Janos and Ill and Payne that would have led to some different outcome, that they were almost ready for it. And that's what Varys is alluding to. And Tyrion acknowledges that having the City Watch under his control puts him in a strategic position to prevent further rash decisions by Joffrey, though he notes he must also account for the loyalty of the Queen's household guard. And Tyrion doesn't really kind of think about what Varys is really telling him, because he is, to an extent, right, saying that, okay, now that he has the gold cloaks under himself, Joffrey's not going to be able to order around them to do this action or that action, but he's not taking it even deeper. Who is the person that actually truly premeditated Joffrey killing Ned? That's what Varys was kind of alluding to. But Tyrion also expresses his confidence in Vylar, who is the person in charge of the Lannister household guard, believing that he is loyal to House Lannister and will protect him from Cersei's machinations, right? Because he has been sent here by Tywin, and Tywin has more power than Cersei does, and Vylar is going to know that, right? So until Tywin comes back, he knows that he has full trust with the Lannister guard. But that'll get us to page 100. As Tyrion kind of continues, right? He's got more men of his own. You know, he had the mountain clans that came with him to King's Landing. He has the sellswords that Bronn is hiring. He has all the men he needs to defend himself from Cersei. But he even thinks about this, like Ned probably was feeling the same way. And he's right? Like Ned at no point really felt like his position was bad. He believed that, okay, yeah, he could bribe the gold cloaks, that everything was going to be okay. And it didn't go so well. So it's Tyrion kind of putting himself in Ned's shoes. And Varys kind of even backs him up more, saying that Sir Jacqueline was courageous, honorable, obedient, and grateful. Somebody that Tyrion could rely upon. But again, Tyrion can't fully trust Varys, and so he has to kind of question his motives for being helpful. And Varys gives his logical, and Varys always gives his answer that is obviously not true, but it's what he says on the surface. He serves the realm, the king, and Tyrion as the hand of the king. And at many times his actions go against that. Perfect example is Book 5, the very last chapter we have before Winds of Winter. He acts against the realm, right? Kevin Lannister was beginning to heal the realm, and so Varys took him out. So there's a lot of that going on as well. Even if you even go into the plot of, for instance, Viserys bringing over the Dothraki, the carnage that would cause on the realm, Varys very much is not what he's saying he is. And Tyrion, like I mentioned earlier, he kind of thinks about the previous hands' deaths, and Jon Arryn and Eddard Stark, both who probably also felt safe until they were killed by Lysa and also by Joffrey. Varys assures Tyrion, though, he is not in danger, then brings up his past riddle from chapter 1, or Tyrion 1, I should say. Who has the true power, right? If you are some sort of sellsword and somebody comes up to you and they're a king, a priest, or a rich man, who are you going to slay and who are you going to follow, right? It depends on the person. And that's what Tyrion basically tells Varys. And Varys elaborates on the riddle again, suggesting the swordsman's role in determining power. If that's the case, right? If this guy with the sword is the one truly with power, why is it not that the best swordsmen rule the world? Why is it kings? Why is it Joffrey? Why was it, Robert when he was drunk and he was, really fat and he didn't really do anything, right? Why were those people in charge, not people like, for instance, Barris and Selmy or Jaime or the Hound or, the Mountain? Why are those people that are really skilled with their swords not the people that are truly in power? And Tyrion kind of acknowledges, well, the swordsman holds the power of life and death, right? And Varys questions what I just said, right? Why would you follow somebody like Joffrey then? And Tyrion kind of counters, saying that, well, these kings, they can call on other swordsmen to fight for them. But again, you go back to the same, you're going in circles. If those swordsmen then have the power of who lives and who dies, is it truly them that's in control and in power? And Varys kind of pokes holes in this, like I just said, right? He pokes in those, he makes Tyrion question it even more, and he implies that knowledge, the gods, and law are various sources of power, but points out their limitations. And he goes back to Ned's death. Like I pointed out later, Varys is trying to get Tyrion to understand what really was going on with Ned's death, right? Because during that point, Varys, who had all this information and knowledge, he couldn't stop it. Cersei, the person in power, couldn't stop it. Nobody could stop Joffrey from killing Ned. So why is that the case? And Tyrion's kind of tired of this game. He challenges Varys, asking if he is providing answers or simply complicating matters. But Varys finally lets it out. He concludes that power resides where people believe it resides. And Tyrion reflects on Varys' statement, questioning if power is merely an illusion or a trick. And that gets us into page 101. But we're getting to the point of it, right? Power is where men believe it resides. If Tyrion shows himself as this powerful figure, it's what Tywin does. Think about, the Battle of the Green Fork, Tywin and his really great armor, and it was very richly dressed, and he, has this reputation that he shits gold, and he's all these things. It's projecting power is more important than actually having the power, because the projecting of the power gives you power, gives you people fearing you or people wanting to be you, and the love of that. All those things are key to understanding what Varys is telling Tyrion, but also to question the power behind Ned's death. Where did that come from? And that gets us to page 101. Varys remarks about shadows, suggesting that even a small man can cast a large shadow. Again, implying Tyrion. He's trying to get on Tyrion's good side, stoking Tyrion's ego, right? Using something that everybody uses against him, his height, and using it as his biggest strength is basically what Varys is kind of telling him. And Tyrion even kind of grows a little bit fond of Varys because of all this kind of wordplay. But Tyrion then wants to ask something else. If we're talking about shadows and the illusion of power, Varys is somebody that does that all the time. He asks Varys who he truly is, referencing his nickname, the Spider. And Varys responds that spies are seldom loved, and insists he is a loyal servant of the realm. All of these things are not necessarily true, but it is what Varys projects. But Tyrion acknowledges kind of the differences between them, because they're both looked down on, right? Tyrion is looked down on for being an imp, while Varys is looked down on for being a eunuch. And he asks Varys who made him like a eunuch. How did that story go? And Varys seems to have some sort of emotion hiding deeper inside of him, but he deflects, saying his story is long and sad, and he shifts the topic to treasons. Now, this is the point that I want to reference Aerys the Mad King. Something I talked about a lot in that series was how could somebody that seemed to be a rational mind go to the extent that Aerys II became. And part of that is knowing every little thing about people that are trying to maybe talk treasonous to you or doing little petty things that could be viewed as treason. All these people that seem unloyal. It's basically if somebody was over your shoulder, 24/7, right? And, you make one, wrong joke, and here's Varys to tell somebody about it. So that's kind of what we're going to go through with the rest of this chapter, as Varys kind of tells him of plots going on within King's Landing. He reveals that there is a plot involving the master of the King's Galley of the White Hart to offer allegiance to Lord Stannis. Tyrion sighs, suggesting the need to make an example of the traitor. And this is something you're going to see in war. People shifting sides. Who do they believe is the true person that can either A, win the war, or the person that they back? Varys then proposes that Sir Jacqueline could arrange for the traitor to vanish, but a trial would be better to ensure loyalty from other captains. And Tyrion agrees. Unfortunately for the captain, that means he is going to be basically tortured by Joffrey and all those things, but it's a public example. It's this idea of don't turn against us or this is what happens. It's what Tywin bases his whole persona on. Varys then notes the next issue that Sir Horace and Sir Hobber Redwine have bribed a guard to escape and sail away disguised as oarsmen, and Tyrion jokingly suggests keeping them as oarsmen for a few years, then acknowledges his sister's feelings about, their departure. And so he does something different. He instructs Varys to inform Sir Jacqueline, seize the bribed guard, and make him serve as a brother of the Night's Watch. Just more men going north. Tyrion then orders that the men be posted around the Moonrunner to prevent the Red Wines from escaping if they try again. Moonrunner being the name of the ship. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier, but just let me clarify that. Varys then makes another mark on the parchment, not acknowledging Tyrion's orders. And that gets into page 102. But think about all these stories, right? How does Varys find these things out? And you think about knowing all this stuff of treason around you, you become very paranoid. That's something that Aerys dealt with for years. Varys then informs Tyrion that Timett, his man, killed a wine seller's son during a gambling dispute because he accused him of cheating. Tyrion questions whether that accusation was actually true, and Varys confirms it was. And Tyrion then kind of lets it slide, right? The guy was cheating. Timett, harmed somebody that kind of had it coming, and so they move on. Varys then goes to the next one, which is another interesting one. A rise in the number of religious figures is come about due to the comet. And Varys describes how these holy men are speaking fear among the populace by predicting doom. And what can you do about that? But think about, for instance, the taking of the storm. If you think about, for instance, the storming of the dragon pit, at the very kind of end of the Dance of the Dragons, it's that same idea. Religion still holds a very big part of many people. And even though their religion and their power waned during the years of the dragon and the Targaryens, it still has an influence over people. Think about our own history and how certain religions have basically formed whole cultures, right? You think about, ancient Greeks, or you think about, Norse mythology, you think about, even getting into Christianity and all the wars fought over that idea. Kind of the same idea here, like that religion has a big sway on people. And Tyrion is kind of just like, yeah, let's just let them rant. There's not much you can really do to kind of calm that. That's one of your least of your problems right now. But Varys counters, saying that their actions are creating fear, to which Tyrion quips that is Varys' job to spread fear. And yeah, I mean, again, you have a situation where there's going to be fear regardless, right? Without the religion, right? You have people coming to take the city, whether that's Renly, Robb, Stannis, Balon Greyjoy, whoever. There is a open war happening at any time. There could be a sacking of the city, and people will remember what that was the last time. Then Varys gets even more personal. He mentions a recent supper held by Lady Tanda, revealing a jest made by Sir Balon Swan regarding the king. And Tyrion just flat out interrupts this. Right now we're talking about table gossip. That's the thing that would have driven Aerys mad, because maybe in the beginning Aerys maybe had the same idea of Tyrion, right? Like, whatever, right? Who cares? But in, for instance, Aerys's case, when you have somebody like Rhaegar, who is getting more and more attention, and there's that growing divide between them, Aerys might start to take these more seriously and lead him down a worse and worse road. These little things where they might seem minor for us, right? But think about every day. You're getting a new report from Varys about people talking against you, all those things. It's going to get to you. And that's something that I think Varys uses sometimes as well. But Varys then compliments Tyrion's wisdom and gentleness, then discreetly pockets his parchment and takes his own leave. Tyrion then reflects on his sister, on how she will react to the dismissal of Janos Slint. I think she's probably going to be quite worried, because I think Cersei believes she had Janos Slint under her thumb. And so now that somebody else is in power and they're more leaning towards Tyrion, Cersei's going to feel much more vulnerable. He anticipates that Cersei will not take the news well, but thinks she can't really do much, right? All she can do is maybe protest to Tywin, but Tywin's in the middle of war. He doesn't really care about Cersei's complaints right now, and he has basically said that Tyrion's in charge. So Cersei has no real power over Tyrion at this moment. She's going to try to find those things, but right now, Cersei can't do anything. And once again, Tyrion feels secure, right? He feels like he has enough support that he shouldn't have to worry, but even then, he doesn't feel great about it. But even after Varys leaves, the Red Keep seems to be some dark and quiet place as Tyrion exits the small hall. Bronn had been waiting for Tyrion in a solar and inquires about Slynt. Tyrion basically informs him of what had occurred, at the dinner, as Janos will be sent to the wall in the next morning, and speculates that he may have replaced one of Joffrey's men with his own, but suspects that he has instead replaced a man of Littlefingers with one of Varys's. And that is the truth. That is the key to it, right? Who does Jaqen serve? Now, it seems likely that, and we know Janos was under Littlefinger, but what are really Varys and Jaqen's connections, right? How woven are they? Bronn attempts to inform Tyrion about Timett's actions, but Tyrion cuts him off. Varys was 2 steps ahead of Bronn, to which Bronn doesn't really seem to be all that shocked. That gets us into page 103. Bronn does go a little further, though, saying that the guy basically underestimated Timett, seeing as though Timett only had 1 eye. It didn't really save him. He describes how Timett killed the wine seller's son by pinning his wrist to the table with a dagger and then ripping out his throat. Quite savage. But, if you're Tyrion, these are the people that are loyal to you. So, on one hand, yeah, really scary, type of death thing, but these are the people that are backing Tyrion. So, you would want them on your side. Tyrion then interrupts, asking Bronn to spare him the gruesome details as his supper is sitting poorly in his stomach. Tyrion shifts the topic to Bronn's recruiting efforts. And Bronn reports that he has recruited 3 new men that night. But Tyrion, like I think a lot of people, would wonder, how do you know which people to actually take, right? You have to make sure people aren't spies and all those things. And we even think about some of the men that Bronn is going to get are actually Littlefinger's men. So that's something that Tyrion questions, and we know that Bronn does not do a good enough job in selecting his recruits. But Bronn explains that he examines the men, questions them about their past combat experience, and tests their ability to lie. All good things, and Bronn would know a lot about people like that, but he still isn't good enough in my opinion. He adds that he also gives them a chance to kill him as part of his evaluation process, which is also a wild thing, because if you're Tyrion, one day Bronn just might not show up. But with that being said, Bronn basically makes a joke of it. If he does die, well, that's the person to hire. But then Tyrion gets to the meat of it. Tyrion, who has been deeply disturbed by Janos Slint and kind of the actions that he did and his underlings did as well, he asks Bronn if whether Bronn would kill an innocent infant if instructed to do so. Bronn then responds he wouldn't do it right away with no questions asked, but first he would ask for payment. And Tyrion reflects on this, right? Thinks about he has plenty of men of his own and considers the implications of Bronn's willingness to kill. It shows that Bronn is loyal for money. Once Tyrion's money runs out and his ability to upgrade Bronn's status runs out, and Tyrion doesn't have much value to Bronn, right? And so this leads him to a lot of mixed emotions because it's another person that isn't kind of going with him because of, the love or respect they have for him. It's for gold. Tyrion has all these relationships in this book that are based upon money. He doesn't have people that actually have his true interests at heart, and that's made quite apparent as he kind of has this mix of emotions to end out the chapter. Some parts of him wanted to laugh, some wanted to cry, and most of all, he wished for Shay. And that gets us to the end of the chapter. I really love Tyrion too. It's a really strong chapter. It really picks up and paints how Tyrion is as a person and what struggle that he is going through right now is. A great character, great chapter, and that'll get us into the next chapter, which is an Arya chapter. So yeah, we're already on our 3rd Arya chapter of the book. Just shows you who the dominant POVs are, right? Tyrion's already had 2, and now you have Arya coming in with her 3rd chapter. So thank you guys all for watching, and I'll see you guys all in the next one. Bye, guys.